right. I almost said the wrong intro. Welcome to Summary Judgment. Doing a video because I actually went to a Judgment event on a couple days before, actually a day before the recording of this. Feels like a couple days. I don't really know what happened there. It's Monday when I'm recording, so that could have something to do with it. Anyways, I went for the first time up to Grognard Games, which is in, technically it's Roselle, but that's near Schaumburg, for those of you who might be joining the channel from other miniatures games, namely a War Machine, and who've been to Adepticon, which is in Schaumburg now. That's Chicago still, for those of you who are nowhere near Illinois and don't really understand the nuances of the difference. If you're an international viewer, Chicago is probably close enough for your understanding still. Anyways, I've never been to Grognard Games. Lovely game store, pretty reasonable size. I'd say I wouldn't call it big, but certainly not small by any means. I would say a good solid sized game store. I loved how they had their store set up for gaming. They had quite a few tables that were just 4x6s ready to go. For that, I want to say they had 10 4x6s, maybe something like that. Very clean store. Everything was laid out really well. I would say honestly, they seemed to be a great shop to go to in the Chicagoland area. Frankly, if you're playing anything, probably except for War Machine. It didn't look like they had a huge Magic the Gathering collection, but aside from that, I think if you play a miniatures game or an RPG, it's probably a good shop to hit up. Yeah, so anyways, there's been a tournament posted out there for a while. Josh, I believe, and forgive me, names for me tend to sort of go in and out a lot, especially guy names that are very typical, like Josh and Eric and Tony and things like that. So Josh was the fella who was running the event, though. I was just double checking their page, and so thanks to him for doing that right off the top of the head. Thanks to Andrew for providing some additional prize support, and Grognard Games did, I think, 100% payout on the event, so that was great. We ended up would have been 7 players, counting the TO. Since we had an odd number, he set out. I think he actually had to run somewhere, so it worked out well for him. 6 players is what we ended up with then, and let me post this in here. And what I decided to play, I kind of didn't really decide what I was going to do until I got there. This was a 3v3 bring 5 pick and ban, I think is the name of this format. So we were only on the 3v3 map and only on the cobblestone version thereof. We rolled every round for what scenario we played. We did a pretty loose Swiss pairing. Like I said, we had 6 players. Yeah, and then what I brought was Rakir, Bastion, Skull, Cruel, and Astario. And round 1, I believe, I thought his name was Mike, but now that I'm looking at the event, I'm questioning my judgment. See what I did there. Anyways, round 1 I played against, we played on map 4, as I said, and I'm not, just to throw this out there, I'm not going to go through literally every detail of the games. They weren't recorded. I don't have the most fantastic memory. I'll do my best. And with these games with a lot more back and forth, I don't necessarily remember, my brain isn't really attuned to remembering the interactions quite as well, so at least not yet. So anyways, in round 1, he had Cruel. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. It's actually pretty tough. I believe he had Rakir, Cruel, Astariel. Did he also have... no. Damn, my memory is shit. I'm going to have to get an app together just to track my game so I actually remember what I played. I know he had Astariel because we both banned Astariel. I picked Bastion, Rakir, and Skull. I think he went Thorgar, Brock? No. Brock, Rakir, Cruel, I think is how he went. Anyways, the way that game played out, again, it was map 4. I got an early Inferno with Rakir, picked up the item. Skull sat on the the shrine for a little while on the left. Eventually, pardon me. Eventually on the right, I was using Bastion Rakir to sort of do some work over there. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I thought this would be easier to remember. Anyways, the way that it played out, his Rakir sort of went to the left, which was originally the direction my Skull was headed. I eventually put my Rakir over there, and because of his positioning, I was able to take advantage, and my Rakir killed his Rakir. On the other side, Skull and Bastion sort of held it down for as long as they could. I don't think I had any deaths in that game, and I, in the long run, ended up winning it 4-0. I put the Vorpal Blade on Thorgar. I keep saying Thorgar. Rakir. Vorpal Blade on Rakir. That paid dividends throughout the game. My dice rolls being really good. He had a couple places where his dice just weren't very helpful, which allowed me to not really need to trade at all, and I was able to cascade that into a win. Honestly, his dice were, I don't know if they were terrible, but they were lackluster for sure, and that helped me out quite a bit. I'm gonna just kind of go through what I remember the games, and then I'm gonna summarize kind of at the end what my thoughts were, since the memories of these are actually much hazier than I expected. Round 2, I played against, I think round 2 was Mike? Yeah, see, this is where it's fuzzy. Anyway, round 2, he had Cruel. Did he also have Rakir? No. Cruel, Brock, Thorgar. That's what he ended up playing. I don't remember what it was that I banned. I chose not to play Bastion this time and went with Astariel, Rakir, Skull. And the way that game played, because of the map, again, it was map 4. Because of how the map played, he was actually able to keep Cruel in a spot. Like, as the game cascaded down, Cruel was able to hide behind the wall and be in a spot where he could harvest a soul. And so I had to try to go. I basically, it was sort of a checkmate situation because I wasn't able to do enough damage to him, and I wasn't able to sort of swing around and get a kill somewhere else. And eventually, he wins. It was either 4-3 or 4-2. I don't remember. He might have pulled one of my last souls off. Either way, I thought that worked out okay. I didn't really love Astariel Skull. In that particular matchup, I didn't feel like Skull was the right support for her, defender for her. So that's something I'll be thinking of. But anyways, yeah, so I don't remember that game totally clearly either. I recall him having Brock and Cruel, and I thought he had Thorgar, who worked pretty well for him in that matchup. But really the way he played it was trying to abuse Rakir's ability to get souls, and he did that quite well, and I was not able to account for that. I'm gonna have a brief commentary on Soul Collection here later. In the final game, I went back to we both banned Astariel again. So just to talk about that, my logic there, and this might be flawed, when they had Astariel and I had Astariel, was once mine was banned, I didn't want to play a game where, with the defender, with Skull anyways, I didn't want to play a game where fire was the thing that was being, like, the ranged attacks were going to be coming down on, specifically, they're not ranged attacks, they're magic attacks, but distance attacks from a long distance coming down on the squishier Rakir and Bastion, and Cruel for that matter, with only really the temporary hit points in there. It might have been fine. Maybe I should have let it go, but I felt like if we're going to play melee game that I was going to be better at it, so that was why I banned Astariel. The last game it was Zarin, Rakir, and Thrommel that I played against. And that was actually a pretty good warband for him. I think Zarin's pretty underrated. Anyways, as the game went, I was able... I actually had a misplay. Nope, that was in the game of the start. The game of the start on my misplay was I should have bought the Ring of Power for her and used Rakir to kill the Inferno to get his item, and I didn't. In game 3, I played a little bit more cagey. He sort of came to me, and as that happened, I was able to sort of like kill off models as I could, and I needed to keep clearing out skeletons, which I thought was important to making sure that I was going to stay alive in the scenario or in the game, and I did. Toward the end, though, he got Rakir kind of stuck in, and he mistakenly had dropped the 3rd Shadow Orb because he had Zarin, and so he couldn't drop another one, which meant he couldn't actually get Rakir out, because you need to be able to drop the 3rd one to go back to one of the first 2 or to the effigy, and he couldn't do it because he was maxed out on shadow tokens, and since he couldn't do it, and I was at 3 souls at that time, he sort of went for a chance to try to kill somebody who was low, who I think also did have a soul, but he failed to do that using Zarin. Zarin even charged in to try to do the explode. Excuse me, the explode 5, but failed, and yeah. So as a result of how that played out, I just killed his Rakir then, and I won. So I went 2-1. I think we decided second was a tie. We didn't want to fight over it and just split it. And like I said, it was a lot of fun. I know from my description here, I'm not really doing a great retelling of it, but I really enjoyed how it played. Just as some feedback that so like, what did I learn is sort of what I want to think about. First, I'd never played map 4, so I learned a lot there. There's a little weirdness with having 2 symbols on Inferno. I don't know if you're supposed to always go for the 2 symbols if they're available or not, so I'll have to talk with the fine folks at Judgment to maybe clarify that. The bounty award I think is good, but I forgot it so many times, so I hope that there's a token from Muse actually that has that you have for that, so you can hopefully forget it less. But there's that. As far as my warband, I kind of put it together when I got there. I was debating between like Zarin and Cruel, and I only have one skeleton for Zarin at the moment, and I wasn't sure how picky people were going to be, and I didn't want to be the reason that people started feeling like they had, like, to me, once I put somebody in the position that they have to accept that I'm proxying something that does exist in the game, I'm kind of the jerk, even though it seems a lot of times like the person who's supposed to give permission is, if they don't, but really you're the jerk for putting in that position, and I didn't want to do that. So I thought, I was like, oh, we'll have a Soul Gazer. I also have Rakir and Skull are both orcs, so like the level 3 works pretty well there at times. I went with Skull Bastion because that's just strong. Rakir is my favorite damage dealer. And then I sort of was like, well, Rakir works sometimes as a melee and sometimes as a ranger. We'll talk more about that as I play more games. But having Astariel, who's one of the few extra few ranged damage dealers that I could sort of use her in that, and have sort of Skull Bastion hold down the front, or I could do Skull Rakir, Skull Cruel, and then sort of stay back, do magic and whatnot. that was my logic there. I think the way I feel having played it was that I actually think there's better defenders to go in that warband than Skull. I mean, he pairs really well with Bastion, of course, but I think there's a couple better options, possibly more in the Thrommel or Marcus direction, because I like the knockdown. It really can help enable Rakir even more than the the +2, because you have to sort of threaten Bastion's more threatened if he does that. And then probably I would say Zaffin almost certainly slots in over Astariel as the default that I would go with, just because that's another way to put poison out there, which is a really strong ability on its own. A and B, Toxin is just phenomenal. And then that makes me think there's a couple other things that I'm going to be thinking about after that. But so I'm sort of looking to tweak some stuff. But like I said, I had a lot of fun. One of the things that playing did, which is really awesome, which is what I'm talking about, is I can tell that I was really excited, because now what I'm doing is taking well, I played this, but how would it be better? And I'm not positive it'll be better until I play it, of course, but once it is, it will be. And another thing that got me really excited to think about was how the sort of ultimate part of this game is the full draft mode. And as things with full drafts go, I'm sort of picking a comp that I'm really gonna like, right? But I need to start thinking of well, if I want to run that comp, would I be, or we call them warbands here, but they're comps in HOTS, which is the MOBA I play. And so if it's sort of going in this direction, well, what can I, especially if I start, if I add a couple more heroes, what can I change and still keep the comp? Or if a certain thing's lost, is that the piece that the comp needed to work and it needs to change? And I don't think this is going to be quite as dramatic as when it's an actual MOBA in not being able to do it, because you're not talking about twitchy down to the second, you need to practice this model to the same degree. So yeah, I'm starting to think about okay, well, if I play, oh, sorry, hold on. There we go. If I do find a good comp here and I work out my 5 and how that's going to play when I add and remove things and whatnot, and then bust that up to a 7, how does that work? And then how does what do I want to say? How will it play out if if 2 of these get picked and banned away from me before I can complete the comp? How would I adjust that? Or when would I just go okay, well, if I play this enough, this is sort of a cool thing that occurred to me too. If you play a certain warband or a certain comp enough, it's not so much that people will counter it, but if you're starting to ban and you always are playing say 2 heroes, and those are things you're familiar with, somebody's going to probably catch on to that over time, especially if it's a local thing, or if as it gets bigger, what you play is known. And then you need to have another plan, right? Because you can't just rely on well, I always play these 3 or these 5 and do well. Well, somebody's gonna be okay, well, I'm gonna ban that one, the most important 1 or 2, and now you're in an awkward spot. So anyways, I'm gonna wrap this up here a little bit. Feel free on my channel to jump in and talk Judgment. I would recommend since it's actually pretty quiet, there's a Judgment Discord as well. If you don't have the link to that, just send me a message. I will find it and give it to you. Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm hopefully going to get more Judgment. I'm hopefully going to get more Judgment model reviews up on the channel. It's a really nice game to get in there around my War Machine as well, especially kind of while I'm in the downtime waiting for some Tharn stuff. So as always, thank you for watching, and we will catch you next time.